Apologise in advance, this is a lot of slides and a lot of screen grabs, but it's the only way to go through the process thoroughly. So there's going to be a bit of death by PowerPoint in this section, but I'm hoping by giving you an actual visual of what it looks like and how to use it, might start to make a little bit more sense to everyone. So the RAV, as we all know, is an online database, but it can only receive data files in two formats. I'm not an IT person, so this doesn't mean a heap to me, other than the fact that I know a little bit more now because I've actually done the process along with our team. We've gone through the registration process and the enrolment process, so we know how to do it. So you can receive it in XML or CSV. So XML is the recommended method for type approval holders by the department. I've asked them why. They believe that if you use XML, again, I'm not an IT professional, but if you use XML, you will minimise the errors and validation of information that you will be providing, or CSV. So CSV seems like the easier alternative, and I do agree to a point. It allows you to put the information into a spreadsheet, just an Excel spreadsheet, and you save it as CSV. So there's two options there. It's totally up to you within your business which one you choose. XML will give you the ability to do, I guess, a higher level software solution to automate the information going in from your current processes, or if you automatically etch your vehicle plates with information, if you can grab that information out then and chuck it into an XML file, that will definitely automate and minimise the administrative burden on that. So for those businesses who don't want to make their own XML file generator or don't know how to make one, which I don't know how to make one, the government or VSS made their own XML file generator. That's a screen grab of one up there. So you put in all your information, and we'll go through exactly step by step how to do that. And at the end, you press the button and it actually creates an XML file for you to save. Got a source URL there as well, because you can test all this. First of all, we're going to be selecting the entry path subcategory. So we're going to be going type approval standard for most of us. It's a drop down, we select it. Next, we put in the VIN. So when you're testing in your business, I understand, I'm not 100% confident on this, but you need to use a VIN that's already in your business, that you've already got from NEVDIS. If you try and use a VIN that is made up or doesn't exist, you'll get a rejected submission because the VIN doesn't exist. We are having this issue because we, as Caravan Industry Association of Australia, aren't manufacturers and don't own VINs from NEVDIS, so we had to get some issued to us. When we did that, we had a lot more success. So when you are testing, use a VIN you already own. The approval number, because light trailer manufacturers at the moment and importers, we don't have approval numbers yet. Use VSB1. That's what we were told to use initially. I've heard that the department also will accept, am I right, Alfred, any number or is that right? But for sake of these and the fact that we know it works, suggest you using VSB1 as the approval number for now. Keep in mind though, once you go from using the test RAV to using it live, it'll actually be your approval number that you hold. The vehicle category code, we went through that before, so we're putting TB or TA or TC in this part. The approval holder name, so this is the person who accepts responsibility for the vehicle's compliance with the required national standards. Where the entry pathway involved is a registered, a RAW or a registered approved workshop, the approval holder is the name of the RAW workshop. So that doesn't really apply to us all that much unless you're going down a concessional pathway. That name may be the signatory or the person who is putting the product on the RAV on your behalf. But for the majority of you, it'll be the actual person of the business. The make. So this one's a little bit confusing at the moment. It's currently defaulted in the test RAV, so if you've currently enrolled and you're having issues when getting rejected submissions that say that the make is incorrect, VSS have taken it upon themselves to shorten everyone's names, which has made it incredibly confusing because they don't tell you they shortened your name. So for ours, when we were testing, we were using our full name, but for the test, they were using CIAA. So if that's an issue for you, try shortening your name or contact them and say, what's my make? Having said that, when you're using the actual RAV, as you would imagine and hope, it'll be exactly as you specified the make in your approval. So it'll be a Nova Caravans or a Caravan Industry Association of Australia will be the make. That's the manufacturer's name. Model. We're currently working through the model and what model represents at the moment. We're having a little bit of difficulty with the department or VSS on what model represents. So at this point, the model for trailers aligns with the vehicle category code. So you'll be putting VCC or vehicle category code as TB. You'll then be putting your model as TB as well. In terms of trying to keep across your models and when you run that VIN then in the RAV and it comes up with TB twice, it's going to be confusing not only for businesses but for the consumer. In an ideal world, we like to see the model name exactly as what you're putting the model on your trailer plate, but we understand that the RAV may not have the functionality and the ability to record that at this point. So we're working with the department on that, and it may be an amendment or an upgrade on the RAV once it's live down track. So just keep that in mind when you're doing it. Don't just put model in as whatever you want or make up a word. Make sure you're matching it up with your vehicle category code. The RAV ATM and GTM rating, that's pretty straightforward. I'm not going to go through, we all know what ATM and GTM ratings are. But what I will say is make sure you're reporting that accurately and it accurately represents what's on your vehicle plate, because the consumer, once they find out that the RAV exists, we all know they're going to go run their VIN and they're going to check what's on there compared to what's on their actual trailer. So accuracy of information is key. TMAS, again, we're going to record that in the XML generator there. We all know what TMAS is. Again, make sure that's accurate. It is actually the TMAS of the product. The build date, the month and year in which the vehicle was substantially completed. Authorised by number. So this is the organisation ID you will be issued by or will get from NEVDIS when you enrol. And I believe that once you enrol, even in the test RAV enrolment, you will then keep the same organisation ID once you're using it live. So the organisation ID is what you put in where it says authorised by number. Authorised by name. So that's the name of entity or authority authorised to add that vehicle onto the RAV. So it might be the approval holder, an AVV, which I won't go into what an approved authorised vehicle verifier is in this session, or it may be the government if you're doing really low volume and the government's actually putting it on the RAV on your behalf. Now, when you're putting these in, obviously we don't need to put kilowatts, we don't need to put seats, we don't need to put B double or road train, but don't put a 0 in there. Make sure you leave it blank. If you put a 0 in there, you'll get a rejected validation because it thinks that you're saying it's got 0 kilowatts and 0 seats. So blank, not 0. When you go to submit or create an XML file, delete all the rows you haven't used, you can submit up to 20,000, is that right? 20,000 entries at any one time. I wouldn't suggest anyone would be doing that many, but it does have the ability to receive a file with up to 20,000 entries at one time, which is more relevant to the automotive guys who will be bringing in ships of cars, and they'll be doing thousands and thousands of RAV entries at a time. So make sure you add or delete a row where appropriate. Form validation. So we're still talking about the XML file generator that VSS has been nice enough to create for us. We validate the form. It'll come up with all these red areas of parts of that form that aren't working, so you can then amend them prior to submitting. Then we're going to generate the file. So we put all the information into this little XML file generator. Then we're going to generate the submission file. So we click that. That's an XML file. So that's after we put all the information, that's the information that goes into the RAV. We then need to save it. This will depend, depending on which web browser you're using. So it may not look exactly like my screen grab there, but essentially you're saving that into your server or wherever you need to save it. You can save the file name of that, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have to be a specific file name for it to go into the RAV properly. So you may call it the date at which you created it. You may, whatever will work with your filing system in your business, but you'll need to save them down onto your server or wherever you need to save them to then attach them to an email, which I'll go through in a minute. So we've focused on XML for doing a RAV submission. But as I said, there's two options. You can do XML or you can do CSV. So here's a screen grab of a CSV format for RAV. So it's a spreadsheet essentially with all of the information fields that we need. and we filled that out with the same information, but instead of doing the XML, we've put it in the CSV file there. So as I said, use Excel or similar editor to create a file for CSV. The header information in that spreadsheet needs to be exactly the same as in the RAV attachments guide, or as I've just showed everyone there. If it doesn't match up, then it won't validate and it won't go into the RAV submission properly. And this is where I can understand where XML potentially would be more beneficial. For date, the number format in the CSV style actually needs to have a preceding apostrophe for it to then recognise the date. So that's all about formatting, and that's why it's so important that everyone's testing this in their business before it comes to when we need to use it for real. Make sure it's on the RAV prior to being registered, and then if we're getting rejections, then it's not good. We need to have it 100% sorted out, all those processes in place before we go live. Then you're going to save the CSV or the Excel spreadsheet that we've got up. We're going to save that as a text file with CSV extension. So we've created either an XML or a CSV with the particulars of the trailer or trailers we want to upload onto the RAV. Once you've done that, it needs to be emailed to NEVDIS. And the frequency of submitting that trailer data information to NEVDIS will be completely up to the business, considering your volume, keeping in mind the RAV updates, from what I understand, every 12 hours. So for instance, if you have a manufacturing facility that's attached to a dealership, and you've literally just finished manufacturing, and you've got the customer picking it up in 5 hours, that's not going to work. You need to be, you cannot put it on the RAV until you've completed it. So keep that in mind. You'll need to put it in the RAV, you'll need to make sure it's had enough time to then go onto the RAV prior to then the dealer being able to register it. So that's why if you're looking at doing maybe a frequency of once a week, that may not work for you if you have tighter turnarounds from finishing manufacturer to registering at the dealership. So it may work for some people. You may want to do it once a week. You might need to do it every day, but just keep in mind that there are those times that when it gets uploaded regularly every 12 hours. And as I said, the RAV entry, it needs to be done prior to the vehicle or trailer departing for the dealership or selling agent. The way the regulators explain it is it needs to be on the RAV before you lose control of it, so essentially before it leaves your premises. And remember again, they can only be entered onto the RAV, it needs to be entered onto the RAV to be eligible for road registration. So you need to email it. I'm actually unsure whether or not you can set this up as an automated process. I'm sure an IT person will be able to figure it out, but you can manually send it, and that's the way we've been testing. So for the test environment, it's the email address that I've listed there. Just chuck that in the two. The subject, it's exactly your organisation ID as issued to you by NEVDIS or department, and your submitter ID as an individual that's also been issued to you. That subject will stay the same for every single submission you ever do. It doesn't change for any other, so that the subject line will always be the same. Then you attach, whether it's an XML file or a CSV file, to the email. Doesn't matter what the file name's called, as I said, that doesn't check that. Then you send it. Once you've sent it, you should get an email reply almost straight away confirming either a successful or an unsuccessful submission. This one here is a successful submission. It took us about 2 weeks to get one, but we got there, which is good. Some of the reasons we got rejected submissions was not because we were putting in the wrong information, it's because the department hadn't considered some things or didn't tell us what we needed to do. And the make being the same as the vehicle category code is a good example of that. If you've tested and you're using the RAV test right now in your business and you haven't got an email back, check the junk, or it might have been filtered as spam. I know some of the larger companies use some email programs that will completely filter it out. You might need to whitelist or list the email address that's coming from as safe for you to be able to receive them. So that's what it looks like. You've got a successful RAV entry. It tells you that 1 was loaded, 0 was rejected. We only loaded 1 there, so that's a successful submission for us. This is what a rejected submission may look like, and you'll get a varied rejected submissions depending on why it's rejected, what's wrong, what have you missed, or what's incorrect. So if we just put some examples in of some rejected submissions, The first one there is because we'd already used the same VIN, so you can't put the same VIN in twice, which makes sense, but if you try and upload the same one, if you've forgotten and potentially attached to the wrong spreadsheet, you've already done it, it'll send you back a rejection and say you already used that VIN. The second example there is that GTM wasn't specified. So it came back and said you needed to put the GTM in. And the third one there is the fact that the VIN didn't exist. So we made up a VIN in that aspect and it didn't work. So you will get a RAV exception report for a detail of the rejection for a whole varied reasons of why. And it will only reject the entry which it lists there. It doesn't reject the entire email. So if you've emailed off 60 submissions and you get a report back saying only one was rejected, it's only just that one. All those other ones are okay. You just need to resubmit that one, figure out why it was wrong, resend it again. This is a screen grab of what the RAV will look like for the public and when you go in to search for a product by VIN. It's exactly what it will look like. Chuck in the VIN. Here we put in a VIN that doesn't exist, and it's basically given us the reasons why you can't see anything. Because this is the test environment, we couldn't find a VIN with a successful submission, but hopefully by the time we make this PowerPoint for everyone to use, we will be able to include a screen grab and successful submission in there.